This is Dr. Harry Anderson. I often get a question about how to compare commercial products, one brand or one feed versus another feed, even within a brand. One of the main ways that you need to look at these is not only from the nutrient profile, which is another topic in itself, but you need to look at the digestibility. I'd like to just explain a little bit about the digestibility of different processing methods. If you feed a raw grain, a coarse grain, the digestibility of those would be somewhere in the 45 to 55% range, depending on which grain it is and how well the animal chews it, etc. There are various factors. If you take that same grain and grind it and expose more surface area and make smaller particles, the digestibility actually increases a fairly good amount. It might get up into that 55 to 60, 65% range, depending on how well you process it. If you steam process it, it's on the higher end of probably 65%. If you just coarse crack it, it's probably in that 55 to 60% range. But if you grind it real fine and feed it, it would be very, very digestible, probably up in that 75%. But you know as well as I do, you can't feed a powdery grain to horses because they don't like it. If they breathe it and it makes dust, they don't want to eat it. If it balls up in their mouth, they don't want to eat it. So we can't feed it in the really heavily processed form. So what we do is we put it in a pellet. That's what we've been doing for many, many years, and it works fine. If you could take that same fine ground grain, put it in a pellet, and put a little pressure on it, you increase the digestibility up to possibly 75%. However, you can go one step beyond that. You can go the extrusion process, which is the one I prefer, because you increase the digestibility from that 75% up somewhere, no one's for sure on any given process, but somewhere around that 90% range, which means that most of that dissolves and digests and falls apart in that small intestine where we want it to fall apart. And also, it prevents any raw starch, which exists in pellets and sweet feeds and cracked grain, that from getting into the hindgut and fermenting and causing any gas or possible colic and lactic acid, possible laminitis problems. So if you want the maximum out of your feeding program, look at the digestibility. Ask your supplier what the digestibility is of that product so that you're getting a minimal amount, if any, raw starch in the hindgut to cause problems. But more importantly, if you extrude a product and it falls apart in the small intestine, you now release all those micronutrients, the B vitamins and trace minerals and things that are going to be absorbed in that small intestine much more efficiently than they are in the hindgut. So you've made your program more efficient, and that's what it's all about when we talk about digestibility, is making it more efficient for the animal to digest and absorb and use all the nutrients it needs.